When I saw my husband sitting in that courtroom, I knew two things immediately. First, he wasn't nervous. Second, he was absolutely convinced he had already won. He sat about 12 feet away from me, shoulders relaxed, jaw loose, hands folded like this whole thing was just another boring meeting he needed to get through before lunch. 8 years of marriage, and here he was, acting like our divorce was an inconvenience, not a collapse. And right behind him, in the second row of the gallery, sat the woman he'd been sleeping with. Her name is Lydia Hale. I didn't know her then, not really, but I knew that posture. Legs crossed just enough to look confident, chin tilted up, eyes calm. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't hiding. Hooked, settled. Like someone who believed she belonged there. My husband, Evan Cole, never once turned around to look at her. He didn't need to. I was sitting at the opposite table, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. My lawyer, Marianne Brooks, leaned in slightly and whispered, "Stay with me." I nodded, even though my chest felt locked, like someone had tightened a belt around my ribs. Then Marianne stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the petitioner has one additional witness." The courtroom didn't go quiet in a dramatic way. It went real quiet. The kind of quiet where you suddenly notice the air vent clicking on and off. Where someone clears their throat 3 rows back and it sounds too loud. Where your own heartbeat feels intrusive. I felt the blood drain from my face as my eyes drifted, slowly, unwillingly, toward the doors at the back of the courtroom. I whispered so softly I'm not sure anyone heard me. "No, it can't be." Evan's smile vanished the second the doors opened. Not faded. Not softened. Collapsed. Like a mask slipping off all at once. And in that moment, before the witness even took a step forward, I knew something had shifted that he hadn't planned for. My name is Isabel Moreno. I'm 32 years old. And until about 9 months ago I thought my life was normal. I worked as a payroll coordinator for a regional logistics company in Wilmington, Delaware. It wasn't glamorous. I made about $52,000 a year, wore sensible shoes, drank my coffee too strong, and believed stability was something you built quietly. I married Evan when I was 24. We'd met 2 years earlier at a 4th of July party. He spilled a drink on my sandals, apologized like it was the end of the world, and somehow turned embarrassment into charm. He was tall, confident, easy to laugh with, the kind of man who made you feel chosen. He owned an auto detailing business. 2 locations. One near the highway, one closer to Newark. He handled the business finances. I handled everything else. And that was the arrangement. I never questioned it because I never had a reason to. Until a Tuesday in April. The mail came early that day. I remember because I was homesick, sitting at the kitchen table in sweatpants, flipping through envelopes absent-mindedly. One of them was addressed to Evan. From Chase Bank. I almost put it in his pile. Almost. The envelope was already half open, like the seal hadn't stuck properly. And through the gap I saw a number that made my stomach tighten. $1,740. A charge from a jewelry store at King of Prussia Mall. I pulled the statement out slowly, my fingers suddenly cold. Below it, $489 at a boutique hotel in Cape May. $67 at a florist. All dated the same random Tuesday. My birthday is in November. Valentine's Day had passed. Our anniversary wasn't until June. I stood in the kitchen staring at that paper and thought, who gets flowers on a Tuesday in April? That night I asked him. Not accusing. Not emotional. Just calm. And that's the part that still unsettles me. He didn't hesitate. He smiled gently, like I was adorable for even asking, and explained everything away. Business expenses. Client appreciation. A watch for a referral partner. A strategy retreat. Flowers for a client's wife. Every answer was smooth. Warm. Rehearsed. And when someone you love looks you in the eye and tells you you're wrong, you want to believe them. So I did. Or at least I tried to. But I didn't throw that statement away. Something in my gut, the same instinct that once told me spilled lemonade wasn't charming, just careless, told me to keep it. I tucked it into a shoebox under the guest bathroom sink. I didn't know then that box would become proof. All I knew was this. The man sleeping 3 feet away from me every night was starting to feel like someone I'd never actually met. I didn't tell anyone about the shoebox at first. I told myself I was being dramatic. That marriage isn't a courtroom drama. You don't collect evidence against the person you love. You trust them. You choose peace. You choose not to look too closely. But peace has a way of rotting when it's built on lies. There was exactly one person I eventually told. Rachel Cole, Evan's younger sister. For 6 years she'd been my closest friend in Delaware. We had standing lunches every other Friday. She knew how I took my coffee. She knew I hated escalators. She knew I cried at animal rescue videos and pretended not to. If something was wrong in my marriage, Rachel would help me see it clearly. Or so I thought. We met at a small cafe off Concord Pike. I remember the rain streaking down the windows, the smell of burnt espresso, the way my hands shook when I slid the credit card statement across the table. I told her everything. The charges. The hotel. The flowers. The way Evan explained it all without blinking. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll look into it," she said softly. "I promise." I went home lighter than I'd felt in weeks. That feeling lasted less than 24 hours. The next evening, Evan came through the front door already angry. Not confused. Not hurt. Furious. He accused me of trying to turn his family against him. Of snooping. Of being paranoid. He said his sister had told him everything. Every word I'd said, every doubt I'd admitted, every fear I'd whispered out loud. I didn't deny it. I couldn't speak. Because in that moment something landed in my chest with a dull final weight. I was alone. My parents and my younger sister live in Tucson, Arizona. Over 2,000 miles away. I'd built my entire adult life here. Evan's friends. Evan's family. Evan's world. And now I understood something terrifying. If I fell, there was no one here to catch me. I tried to tell myself I was wrong. That Rachel had just been loyal to her brother. That families close ranks. That it didn't mean anything worse was happening. But here's the thing. I work in payroll. I stare at numbers all day. I know what legitimate business expenses look like. And flowers on a random Tuesday for a client's wife don't look like one. Love makes you stupid on purpose. And it's expensive. Over the next few months, from April to August, Evan didn't pull away. He leaned in. He started coming home later. 9, 10, sometimes after midnight. Always with an excuse. A supplier meeting. A staffing issue. A problem at the Newark location. His phone lived face down on the counter like it was hiding from me. And then came the detail that still makes my skin crawl. He started showering the second he walked in the door. 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, and the man who used to fall asleep watching sports highlights was suddenly obsessed with being clean. Scrubbing. Rinsing. Washing something away. If cleanliness is next to godliness, Evan was trying to baptize himself nightly. The money started tightening in July. One Monday morning before work, I logged into our joint account and saw an $11,000 transfer to a business account I couldn't access. I asked him about it. Equipment upgrades, he said easily. New pressure washer system. That Saturday I drove past both shops. Nothing had changed. Same faded signage. Same cracked hoses. Same peeling decals that had needed replacing for years. A few days later I couldn't log into our savings account anymore. Password changed. Evan said it was a security update. He'd give me the new one later. Later never came. Then he quietly reduced his monthly deposit into our joint checking. From $3,200 to $1,800. My salary barely covered the mortgage. I started bringing leftover pasta to work. 4 days in a row. My coworker finally asked if I was meal prepping. I told her I was on an Italian wellness plan. She laughed. Mine cracked. The worst part didn't come from the bank. Came from Instagram. Late August, Rachel hosted a family barbecue. I wasn't invited. No call. No text. No awkward "I know things are weird but..." Nothing. I found out the way people find out their lives are changing now, through someone else's filtered photos. And there, in the background of one picture, laughing comfortably beside Evan's mother, was a woman I didn't recognize. Dark hair. Sundress. Familiar posture. She looked like she belonged. That was Lydia Hale. Evan filed for divorce 2 weeks later. He filed first. His attorney's proposal demanded a 60-40 split, in his favor. The business was suddenly valued at less than half of what Evan had bragged about for years. The house was undervalued. And in black and white, his petition stated that I had contributed minimally to the marriage. 8 years of holding everything together. Minimal. I parked at a gas station that afternoon, turned off the engine and cried until my face hurt. I had a little over $3,000 to my name. No local family. No real friends left. And a husband who had just legally declared that I was worth almost nothing. The next day during my lunch break I walked into the public library, not because I had a plan, but because I needed somewhere quiet that wasn't my house. I wandered until I pulled a random book off a shelf. Inside it was a business card. On the back someone had written in blue ink, "She's worth it. Call her." And for the first time in months I did. I almost didn't call the number on that card. I sat in my car in the library parking lot, phone in my lap, staring at it like it might disappear if I waited too long. Asking for help felt like admitting failure. Like saying out loud that my marriage hadn't just cracked. It had already collapsed and I'd been standing inside the rubble pretending the walls were still up. But something about those 4 words, "she's worth it," cut through the noise in my head. So I called. The woman who answered introduced herself as Margaret Lane, family law attorney. Her office was on Market Street, above a sandwich shop that made the stairwell smell like roasted peppers and warm bread. I remember that smell because it grounded me. It felt real. Solid. Not like the fog I'd been living in. Margaret was in her late 50s, broad-shouldered, steady, the kind of woman who looked like she'd carried heavy things and never complained about it. She shook my hand once, firmly, and said, "Sit. Tell me what you've got." I brought the shoebox. I opened it on her desk like it was something fragile. Inside were the credit card statement, screenshots of Venmo payments from Evan to someone listed as L. Hale, and printed photos from social media. Lydia at family events, smiling like she belonged. Margaret read silently for a long moment. Then she adjusted her glasses and said, "These numbers are ambitious." She explained something called dissipation of marital assets. Every dollar Evan spent on Lydia during our marriage wasn't just betrayal. It was money taken from our estate. And in this state it was recoverable. Then she paused. "If he's using the business to move money," she said carefully, "this gets bigger." Subpoenas went out the following week. What came back made the shoebox look like a warm-up act. Lydia Hale was on the business payroll. Listed as a marketing consultant. Salary, $4,800 a month. She'd been there for over a year. No campaigns. No website updates. No social media. No deliverables of any kind. I did the math automatically. It's muscle memory for me. Over $67,000. Paid to my husband's girlfriend. Then Margaret slid another page across the desk. Evan's sister Rachel was on payroll too. Administrative support. $1,200 a month. Rachel, who had never worked a single day at the business. Rachel, who already had a full-time job elsewhere. Rachel, who'd betrayed me so smoothly it almost impressed me. Suddenly everything clicked. The warning call. The family barbecue. The silence. Loyalty, I realized, has a price tag. And Rachel had been getting paid. Then came the third discovery. A separate entity I'd never heard of. Harbor Ridge Solutions. No employees. No products. No services. Just a place money went to disappear. $93,000 over 2 years. Margaret leaned back and said, "This isn't sloppy. It's intentional." My hands were shaking, not from sadness anymore but from clarity. I'd been eating leftovers and counting pennies while Evan was building an escape fund right under my nose. Late November he figured out I'd hired a lawyer. Rachel showed up at my workplace during lunch. Walked straight into the break room like she owned it and started talking, loudly, about how I was destroying the family. How Evan had made one mistake. How I was going to ruin everyone. I didn't respond. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. People who yell are usually afraid. People who stay quiet are usually ready. That night something in me shifted permanently. I started waking up at 5:30 every morning. Before work I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and organized everything. Bank statements. Transfers. Screenshots. Dates. Cross-references. This was my language. And Evan's numbers were screaming. Then Margaret called me with news I wasn't prepared for. Someone from Evan's family had reached out to her office. Not Rachel. Someone else. His mother. Eleanor Cole. The same woman I'd watched hand Lydia a plate at that barbecue. The woman I'd called Mom for 8 years. The woman who hadn't spoken to me in months. I assumed blood had won. I was wrong. Eleanor told Margaret everything. Evan had been drinking the night of the barbecue. Talking. Bragging. He told her the business was pulling in over $400,000 a year. He laughed about hiding money. About how I'd take whatever scraps he offered because I didn't have the spine to fight. And Eleanor heard her late husband's voice in her son's mouth. She'd lived this before. She'd stayed quiet once. She wasn't going to do it again. She told us about a fireproof safe at the main shop. Inside it, a backup hard drive. Real numbers. Real records. The court ordered discovery. The drive confirmed everything. Every transfer. Every lie. Every hidden dollar. From November to January, Evan and I lived in the same house like strangers. Passing each other without words. Sharing space but nothing else. I knew everything. He knew nothing. And patience, I learned, isn't weakness. It's strategy. By the time the court date arrived, Evan walked in smiling. I walked in carrying 9 months of truth. And one witness he never imagined would speak. Evan walked out of that courtroom without handcuffs. That's something people don't always understand. Justice doesn't usually come with sirens or dramatic arrests. It comes slower. Quieter. Like machinery starting up behind a locked door. And Evan knew it. I could see it in the way his shoulders had collapsed, in the way his eyes wouldn't land anywhere for too long. He hadn't lost everything yet, but he'd lost control of the timeline. And for a man like him, that was worse than punishment. I stepped outside into the cold January air and took my first full breath in months. The building doors closed behind me with a heavy final sound. For 9 months, my life had been a series of small humiliations. Counting grocery dollars. Eating the same leftovers. Being erased quietly while smiling in public. Being told, directly and indirectly, that I was too emotional to understand money. And yet here I was. With the house. With my share of a business I'd helped hold together in ways no spreadsheet ever recorded. With the truth finally on paper, stamped and signed. But here's the thing no one tells you. Winning doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like stillness. In the weeks that followed, the fallout unfolded exactly the way Margaret said it would. Slowly. Methodically. Audits. Letters. Requests for documentation. Evan's name stopped being spoken casually and started being spoken carefully. People asked me if I felt satisfied. I didn't know how to answer that at first. Satisfaction implies hunger. And I wasn't hungry anymore. I was done. I moved back into the master bedroom. Changed the sheets. Opened the windows. Threw out things I'd been holding on to for reasons I couldn't even explain. The shoebox went into the trash. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had done its job. One afternoon, weeks later, I found myself standing in the kitchen holding a spatula, remembering something Evan once said during an argument. "You're too emotional to understand money." I laughed. Not bitterly. Not loudly. Just a soft, surprised sound. Because emotion hadn't been my weakness. It had been my signal. Emotion is what told me something was wrong when the numbers didn't line up. It's what made me keep that statement. What made me ask questions. What made me refuse to disappear quietly. I understand money just fine. I just needed someone to stop lying about it. Eleanor and I don't talk often now. We don't need to. Sometimes she sends a text. Nothing dramatic. A photo of a recipe she thinks I'd like. A question about a plant she can't keep alive. We've learned that relationships don't always survive intact. Some survive honestly. As for Lydia, I don't follow her story. I don't need to. I know enough to know that being chosen by a man like Evan was never the prize it looked like from the outside. Rachel never apologized. That tells me everything I need to know. Here's what changed the most though. It wasn't the money. It was my sense of scale. I used to think betrayal had to be loud to count. That it came with shouting, slammed doors, obvious villains. I was wrong. Sometimes betrayal comes with a smile. With reasonable explanations. With people you trust telling you you're imagining things. And sometimes, survival looks like spreadsheets and patience and waking up early to quietly prepare. If you're watching this and you feel that tightness in your chest, the one that tells you something isn't right, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. And you're not weak for wanting proof before you speak. Pay attention to the small things. The unexplained charges. The changing passwords. The way certain people get angry when you ask calm questions. Truth doesn't panic. Lies do. I didn't win because I was louder. I won because I was methodical. And because when the moment came I didn't look away. That courtroom wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the end of a lie I'd been living inside. And walking out of it into cold air and quiet space, I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't lose 8 years. I got myself back.